Today, we're going to be continuing our study of properties of exponents, and we're going to be looking at simplifying exponents. So let's begin. 1a, x to the 10th power multiplied by x to the 5th power. As you can see, we have the same base, so we can just write that down here. And all we have to do is add our exponents. So add exponent of 10 and add the other exponent of 5. So if we add those together, we get x to the 15th power, which is our final answer. Next problem, 1b, y to the 3rd power divided by y to the 5th power. So as you can see, they have the same base, so we can write that down here. And when we're dividing exponents, instead of adding them together, we have to subtract them. So we subtract y to the 3rd, so we subtract the exponent of 3 by the exponent of 5. And now we have y to the 3 minus 5 power. And 3 minus 5 is negative 2. Now we could just leave it like this, but we learned something in our last video where if we have a negative exponent, we have to flip the fraction over. So instead of having y to the negative 2 power, we have to have a 1 over it. So now it would be y to the 2nd power, which would be our final answer. 1c, b to the 4th power over b to the 7th power. So as you can see here, we're still doing division. So what we have to do is, since our bases are the same, we subtract our exponent from the numerator, which is 4, by the exponent in the denominator, which is 7. So now we get b to the 4 minus 7 is negative 3, so b to the negative 3rd power. And as we considered in our previous problem, if we have a negative exponent, we can just flip the fraction over. So now it would be 1 over b to the 3rd power. So now our exponent for b is positive. Problem 2, 3x to the 3rd power multiplied by 6x to the 5th power. So first we're going to multiply our 3 and 6. That gives us 18. And next we're going to multiply our x and our x to the 3rd and x to the 5th because they are like terms. They have the same base. And when they have the same base, we can add the exponents. So now we have x to the 8th power. So our final answer is 18x to the 8th power. 3. 2y in parentheses to the 3rd power multiplied by 3x in parentheses to the 2nd power. So remember, if we're raising it to an exponent, all we have to do is distribute it into the parentheses. So we distribute it to the 2 and to the y, and distribute our exponent of 2 in here to our 3 and our x. So we would have 2 to the 3rd power and y to the 3rd power multiplied by 3 to the 2nd power and x to the 2nd power. Now we know that 2 to the 3rd power is 8 and y to the 3rd power, and 3 to the 2nd power is 9, and just have our x squared here. Now we can just multiply, just the way we did in our problem 2. 8 times 9 is 72, and y to the 3rd power and x to the 2nd power, they're not like terms, so we will just leave them as is. We cannot multiply them. So we'll just have y to the 3rd power and x to the 2nd power. Problem 4, 5a to the 3rd, b to the negative 2 over 15, b to the 5th power, a to the 2nd power. So here we're going to have to do some simplifying. So the first place I see we can simplify is our 5 and 15. And if you remember, 5 over 15 simplifies down to 1/3. So now we have a to the 3rd power. We could write our 1 here if you want to. A to the 3rd power, b to the -2, over 3 to the 3b to the 5th power, and a to the 2nd power. So now what we would have to do is simplify our exponents here. Now a to the 3rd power, we can subtract that with a to the 2nd power because they have the same base. So what we would get is, if we subtract them, we would get a to the 3rd minus 2, which would equal a with 1 power, or just a. So then our expression would look like this. 1a, because if we're simplifying it, our a just goes to the top, and b to the -2 power, and 3b to the 5th power. So now a is no longer on the bottom, on the denominator. Next, we're going to have to deal with our b to the -2 power and b to the 5th power. As you can see here, we can technically subtract these, but as you can see, b to the -2 power, our exponent is negative. So what we can do is bring that b to the -2 power to the denominator. So now we would have a over 3b to the 5th power multiplied by b to the 2nd power. And if you remember, we can just multiply our exponents that have the same base. So we would get b to the 5 plus 2, which would get us b to the 7th power. So our final answer would be a over 3b to the 7th power. We're down to our final problem, problem 5. So in our brackets, we have -3x to the 8th power, y to the 4th power, over 9x to the 4th power, y to the 2nd power, and this is all raised to the -2 power. So before we start and distribute this -2 power to each one, we can make this a bit easier for ourselves. And if you remember, when we have a negative exponent, we would flip the fraction over. So that's what we're going to do. Inside the parentheses, we're going to flip the fraction over. So inside our parentheses or bracket, we're going to put our 9x to the 4th power, y to the 2nd power on the numerator, and our -3x to the 8th power, y to the 4th power on the denominator. And now what that does is makes our exponent of -2 positive. So our next step now is to simplify. So what can be simplified here? It looks like 9 and -3 can be simplified. We know that 9 divided by -3 is -3. So that's going to be on our numerator, -3, and x to the 4th power and x to the 8th power can be simplified. If we do our division, x to the 4th power minus 8, okay. Now we have x to the -4th power. So that's going to go on our numerator. And now we can simplify y to the 2nd power and y to the 4th power. If we do that, we get 2 minus 4. We get y to the negative 2 power. So it's going to go here on our numerator. Now, as you can see here, our exponents for x to the negative 4 power and y to the negative 2 power are negative. So what we're going to do as our next step is bring them down to the numerator. Because remember, when we have negative exponents, we flip the fraction over. So now we have negative 3 over, we're going to bring this one down. So that's going to be x to the 4th power. Because once it's on the denominator, now it's positive. And once we flip it around, and now we're going to bring down our y to negative 2, and it becomes y to the 2nd power. So now we can do our final step and distribute our exponent of 2. Now we have negative 3 to the 2nd power over x to the 4th power raised to the 2nd power, and y to the 2nd power raised to the 2nd power as well. So now if we simplify this further, we know that negative 3 to the 2nd power is 9. So that will be our numerator. And if we use our properties of exponents, we would multiply by the exponent we're raising our other exponent to. So now we have x to the 4th multiplied by 2 power, which would get us x to the 8th. And we'll do the same for y to the 2nd power. Y to the 2nd power multiplied by 2. So that will get us y to the 4th power. And that's our final answer.